Hello, I'm Jonathan Davis, and this is Strategic Observer's Week in Review for November 16th, 2019. The subject, Russia seems increasingly prepared to risk a limited war, and a nuclear war at that, to regain control over the Baltics. A recent study by the RAND Corporation found that a conflict that involved a nuclear escalation between Russia and NATO over the Baltics is much more possible than many think. Historically, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania have fallen under Russian influence. The three countries were part of the Soviet Union for decades. In addition, it's been established that Russian President Vladimir Putin would like to reconstitute as much of the former Soviet Union as possible. When the Baltics became NATO members in 2004, there was little Russia could do about it at the time. Moscow did not have the diplomatic, military, or economic strength to challenge NATO in any significant way. Today, however, after years of rebuilding the Russian military, it's much more capable and much more lethal. That alone makes conflict more likely, not less, that and the fact that Russia is a revisionist power. But also, as the RAND study noted, Moscow's nuclear strategy incorporates an escalate to de-escalate strategy that would see limited use of nuclear weapons to defend gains made by the Russian conventional forces in an early campaign. The escalate to de-escalate essentially means that Russia would use a weapon of mass destruction to prevent retaliation by NATO. RAND estimates that NATO does not have sufficient combat power in or near the Balkans to blunt a conventional Russian invasion. The study also concluded that within 2 to 3 days, Russian forces would occupy each of the three Baltic capitals. NATO's options at that point become ominous. One, the alliance could begin mobilization for a lengthy and bloody war to retake the Balkans, as per Article 5 of the NATO Charter. This option would leave the Baltics in ashes, but would eventually see an ejection of Russian forces. Another of NATO's options would be use of tactical, low-yield nuclear weapons to blunt a Russian invasion. But a third and more viable option for a rich alliance like NATO is to make the investment of about $10 billion to deploy several brigade combat teams and armor in a number sufficient to blunt, or at least preferably deter, a Russian invasion, say 30,000 troops. That number of NATO forces would not allow Russia to plausibly claim that NATO was in a position to invade Russia. 30,000 troops would in no way be sufficient for that. There are other factors to consider too, including the Russian population. Would the Russian people support an invasion of 3 NATO countries? If they did support an invasion initially, would that support hold up under certain NATO counterattacks that would produce scores of Russian casualties? That is, if NATO even did respond. Would European and American voters support a war to liberate the Baltics, especially after taking great casualties right off the bat? In 2014, Putin calculated that European countries and the United States would do nothing if he invaded and annexed the Crimea and then supported Ukrainian separatists with military equipment. He was right. Putin correctly calculated that, in spite of the Budapest Memorandum, which essentially obligated the U.S. and some European countries to assist in Ukraine's defense, they would not come. If Putin calculates that NATO won't risk a nuclear war to defend the Baltics, he will make a move on them. RAND believes that the best way to keep Putin's ambition in check is to bolster forces in the Baltic to deter an invasion in the first place. I'm Jonathan Davis, and this is Strategic Observer.